Good morning, everyone. Out of 26 chapters of the Poetics, we have done 6 chapters. Today we will start chapter 7. Today we will start with chapter 7 and we will do to chapter 10th. In chapter 6, we have discussed different formative parts of tragedy. In chapter 7, we will discuss plot construction. Plot. In chapter 6, we have seen that plot is the most important element of tragedy. It is the most important formative part of tragedy. In chapter 7, Aristotle builds upon plot construction. Having defined the 6 parts of tragedy, Aristotle reached on a plot. So, having thus distinguished the parts, let's now consider the proper construction of the fable or plot. Another term for the plot Aristotle used here is fable. So, here we will consider the proper construction of the plot. In this chapter, we can know the proper construction of plot, as that is at once the first and the most important thing in tragedy. Aristotle called plot as the soul of tragedy. We have laid it down that a tragedy is an imitation of an action that is complete and whole and of some magnitude. All these things we have seen in the definition of tragedy. For a whole may be of no magnitude to speak of. All of us know about what is whole. Whole that has beginning, and middle and end. Now a whole is that which has beginning, middle and end. A beginning is that which is not causally necessarily after anything else and which has naturally something else after it. So a beginning always carries something after it. And end is that which follows naturally after something itself. So end always follows middle and middle follows beginning. So these are three components of a whole. So whole consists of beginning, middle and end. And end is that which follows naturally after something itself. End should be spontaneously or naturally. It should not be forcefully applied, either as its necessary or usual consequent, and with nothing else after it, and a middle that which follows naturally after something and has also something after it. So here we see that what is a well constructed plot. What are the things that we see in a well constructed plot? Therefore cannot either begin or end at any point one likes. Beginning and end in it must conform to the principles just described. So important things that we see in a well constructed plot are beginning, middle and whole. In other words, it should be complete in itself. Again, to be beautiful, a living creature or any other whole made up of parts. So here, Aristotle tries to define the beauty of a plot. So a plot here is compared with a living creature. A living creature that is made up of many parts. So again, to be a beautiful, a living creature or any other whole made up of parts must not only present a certain order in its arrangement of parts, but also be of a certain definite magnitude. That parts should have their own value, and beauty is a matter of size and order and therefore impossible either. So if there is a size order, then we can say that something is beautiful, either it is impossible. In a very minute creature, since our perception becomes indistinct as it approaches instantaneity, or in a creature of vast size, one say 1000 miles long, as in that case, instead of the object being seen all at once, the unity and wholeness of it is lost to the beholder. Means a standard length of a plot should be noted by plot plot writer, otherwise it will lost its magnitude. So here Aristotle means to magnitude that proper size or length a plot should have. If it has very it has least length, then it becomes invisible, or it loses its value. In a creature of vast size, when a plot is of a length that is very vast, then one then an audience cannot enjoy its availability. Just in the same way, then as a beautiful whole made up of parts, or a beautiful living creature must be of some size, a size to be taken in by the eye. So a plot should be of a length that can be comprehended by a reader. So, and this ability of comprehension by someone, very close, maintains its beauty, its magnitude. So everything should be in balance. As for the limit of its length, so far as that is relative to public performances and spectators, it does not fall within the theory of poetry. If they had to perform 100 tragedies, they would be timed by water clocks, as they are said to have been at one period. The limit, however, set by the actual nature of the thing is this: the longer the story, consistently with its being comprehensible as a whole, the finer it is by the region of its magnitude. As a rough general formula, a length which allows of the hero passing by a series of probable or necessary stages from misfortune to happiness, or from happiness to misfortune, may suffice as a limit for the magnitude of the story. It means it seems true to life. It should have a balanced length, and it should have a time of period that a man can survive. In chapter 8, Aristotle dwells upon the unity of plot. Either a plot has unity or not, either a plot should have unity or not. The unity of a plot does not consist, as some suppose. It is variable in its having one man as its subject. An infinity of things befall that one man, some of which it is impossible to reduce to unity, and in like manner there are many actions of one man which cannot be made from to form one action. The truth is that, just as in the other imitative arts, one imitation is always of one thing. So in poetry, the story, as an imitation of action, must represent one action, a complete whole, with its several incidents so closely connected that transposal or withdrawal of any one of them will disjoin and dislocate the whole. For that which makes no perceptible differences by its presence or absence is no real parts of the whole. From what we have said, it will be seen that the poet's function is to describe not the thing that has happened, So in chapter 9 we will see the difference between a historian and poet. Poet does not just describe the things, he presents the probability of the things. A poet presents what should be, what might be. He unlike the historians, he does not describe what has happened. From what we have said, it will be seen that the poet's function is to describe not the thing that has happened, but a kind of thing that might happen. That is, what is possible as being probable or necessary. The distinction between the historian and the poet is not in the one writing prose and the other words. You might put the work of Herodotus into words and it would still be a species of history. So the composition of matter in prose and verse is not the difference between history and poetry. These are two different things on the basis of another facts. A matter of history also would be written in verse. And if you wrote some matter from history in verse, then also it will be a species of history. The true difference consists really in this, that the one describes the thing that has been, and the other a kind of thing that might be. So, history describes the things that has been, and the poetry describes the thing that might be. So, difference is of has been and might be. Hence, poetry is something more philosophical and of higher significance than history. As Aristotle here compares history and tragedy and presents history and poetry and presents poetry as superior to history since its statements are of the nature rather of universals, whereas those of history are of the nature of particulars. So theme of poetry is of universal, and history presents facts of uh, a matter, area, etc. By a universal or general statement, I mean one as to what such or such a kind of man will probably or necessarily say or do, and which is the aim of poetry, though it affixes proper names to the characters. So the facts that history presents applied only to particular persons, and the ideas that are presented in poetry are applied to entire human race, and that can be regarded as universal. The particular is as to what, say, Alcibiades did or had done to him. In comedy, this has become clear by this time. It is only when their plot is already made up of probable incidents that they give it a basis of proper names, choosing for the purpose of any names that are given to them instead of writing like the old iambic or satiric poet about particular persons in tragedy. However, they still adhere to the historic names, and for this reason that what is possible is credible, whereas we are not sure as to the possibility of that which has not happened and which has happened is manifestly possible, else it would not have come to pass. Nevertheless, even in tragedy there are some plays with but one or two known names in them. So the tragedies that depends for the subject matter on the historic names also adhere to the historic names. Nevertheless, even in tragedy, there are some plays with but one or two known names in them, the rest being inventions. Though some one or two names are known very well, but other names that can be called as inventions by the tragedy writer. And these are some without a single example: Agathon's Antheus, in which both incidents and names are of the poet's inventions. It is not based on historical events, and it is no less delightful on that account. So that one must not aim at a rigid adherence to the traditional stories on which tragedies are based. It would be absurd, in fact, to do so, as even the known stories are only known to a few, though they are a delight nonetheless to all. So, stories from history are not known to all, but when they are moved into tragedies, then they are the source of delight for everyone. It is evident from the above that the poet maker must be more the poet. Here, Aristotle uses the word maker for the poet. So it is evident from the above that the poet maker must be more the poet of his plots than of his verses. So a poet's focus should be on his plot, its arrangement of incidents, not on his verses. Inasmuch as he is a poet by virtue of the imitative elements in his work. So the subject matter that is presented in the tragedy has more value, and it is actions that he imitates. So what is the important thing in here? Action and arrangement of these actions. So plot is most important thing, and uh, verse is not so important for this plot. And if he should come to take a subject from actual history, he is nonetheless a poet for that. Whatever the source of a poet must may be, but arrangement of these incidents is more important. Since some historic occurrences may very well be in the probable and possible order of things, and it is in that aspect of them that he is their poet or maker. Of simple plots and actions, the episodic are the worst. There should not a tragedy should not have episodes. There should be a plot. I call a plot episodic when there is neither probability nor necessity in the sequence of its episodes. So that is episode when is a plot episodic? When there is a lack of probability or necessity, then a plot is called episodic, and this is not a good ideal plot. Actions of the sort bad poets construct through their own fault and good ones on account of the players. His work being for public performance, a good poet often stretches out a plot beyond its capabilities and is thus obliged to twist the sequence of incident. Tragedy, however, is an imitation not only of a complete action but also of events arousing pity and fear. A tragedy requires an action that is complete along with the capacity of arising pity and fear. Such incidents have the greatest effect on the mind when they occur unexpectedly and at the same time in consequence of one another. There is more of the marvelous in them than if they have happened of themselves or by mere chance. When matters of chance seem most marvelous if there is an appearance of design, as it were in them, as for instance the statue of Macbeth at Argos killed the author of Macbeth's death by falling down on him. When I look around at a public spectacle for incidents like that, we think to be not without a meaning. A plot, therefore, of this sort is necessarily finer than others. In chapter 10, Aristotle discusses the kinds of plot. There are two kinds of plot: simple and complex. A plot is of simple kind or complex, since the actions they represent are naturally of this twofold description because actions are of these two kinds. Action may be simple or may be complex. The action proceeding in the way defined as one continuous whole I call simple. When the change in the hero's fortune takes place without peripety or discovery and complex. So when there are ups and downs in the fortune of hero, then the action or plot is called as complex. When it involves one or the other or both, there should each of them arise out of the structure of the plot itself so as to be the consequence necessary or probable of antecedents.